Okay, today we're going to tie a Clouser minnow that I use for the Texas coast for reds and sea trout. I'm using a number 2 Mustad 34011 stainless hook with a long shank. I'm using red lead eyes. I forget what size these are. I'm using white thread for the main thread. And let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is lay down a layer of thread on the shank of the hook, the purpose of which is to give the eye something to sit on that has friction, because the eye is fairly heavy, and when you're casting this fly, the eye has a tendency to slip on the bare shank, so we put a little thread on the shank so that doesn't happen. I put a little saddle behind the eye, so that when you're casting it, it doesn't slip backwards. Cut off the excess. Then we put the eye on top, and in a figure 8 pattern, you go over and under the eye, a lot of times. I don't have a number for you. Now what I do next is I create a saddle underneath the eye. As I go under the eye, over the eye, under the eye, over the eye, in a figure 8 pattern to create a saddle underneath, and that is just more thread for the eye to grab onto. Then I just go back over and under again a few times, and you can see that we've gone over and under at least 30 times probably. Alright, now we're using kind of a shrimp colored bucktail. We're going to cut about roughly 2 inches of bucktail. And this is where you choose how much hair you use, depending on if you want like a heavy fly as far as lots of hair, or a sparse fly. This is my normal thing. I use kind of a heavy fly. So in front of the eye, I cinch down on the bucktail hairs fairly tight to hold it in place. Then I go over the eye, and very lightly behind the eyes I put a few wraps of thread to create that classic Clouser shape. Then I go back to the front and put a few more threads, and there's a few sticking out, so we'll just cut those, or you can just pull them out. Alright, the next step, if your vise rotates, is to take your white bucktail, about the same length as before, and one thing you'll notice is this color pattern is backwards from most Clousers. This is how I started tying them a long time ago, and they work, so I've never corrected it. Normally the white is on top, because when these Clouser minnows swim through the water, the eyes are facing downward. In a normal minnow, the belly is white, but in this case it's backwards, and it just seems to work. So what I do is I put the white thread down again. I start in front of the eyes and cinch it down pretty good. Then I go in front and very lightly put a few wraps to give the classic Clouser shape. Then I go back under the eyes to the front. I rotate the fly back. Notice there's a few hairs sticking out, so let's just get them out of there. Then with the whip finish tool, you grab on with the hook part and you go and you wrap around this rear part of the whip finish tool, and you notice that I could easily slide this back and forth, put the excess thread over the eye, and then start wrapping, and you see that the thread under the hook is passing over the excess thread that's over the eye, and that's what creates the knot. And every time you do a wrap, you just kind of lengthen it a little bit. 5 or 6 or 7 times. You let go of that. You pull down hard to finish it. Cut off the excess. Then with your scissors you can just cut off the little extra hairs that are sticking out here and there. And that's basically it. I usually use a little super glue on the threads so that this fly doesn't fall apart. And this is my quick 1-minute Clouser Minnow for the Texas coast.